so that like I'm doing a bunch of writes and I know that I'm just copying over to a new cluster. So I'm going to use one for now, and then I want to quorum later.
Yeah, so it's tunable per write.
Okay.
So you can, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And so that's where that kind of, so the question was essentially, you know, is when you set up the index, are you committing what your write strategy is? And no, it's per write, so you can change it on the fly, which is good. ElasticSearch, one of the points that's a little more difficult is doing backups. It doesn't really have a backup facility, you know, like a MySQL or an Oracle or an MS SQL or something like that has. What it has is what's called a gateway, which allows it, you can specify a way that it can basically make a replica of its data structures outside of the machine or outside of its normal storage mechanisms, so that if the node goes down hard and, you know, some of the data on disk becomes corrupted, that the node can recover itself. The nice thing about it is, since it is distributed anyway, and if you have at least a good replica remaining, if the node goes down hard, let's say the machine dies, power supply goes out, you can just pull that machine out, put a new machine in, and it will get the copy, you know, it will copy the data from the other nodes that have good replicas of that already. But having a gateway here can be really quite helpful in the strategy. It also has a concept of a river, which is basically a type of connector. It's a way to get data into Elasticsearch, right? So it has kind of a Twitter river that's fun. Actually, I have a project that I use that in, and the nice thing is it's kind of built in. You can do a couple of configurations. So, I mean, literally in 5 minutes, you can spin up Elasticsearch node and configure the Twitter river, and it'll start collecting tweets for you. And obviously, you can start searching them. Sir?
What's the performance like using RabbitMQ? Have you played with that?
So the question is, what is the performance using RabbitMQ? I don't know. I haven't used it, but I know that there's quite a few people that are using connectors for, you know, rivers for it.
I'm thinking in terms of a distributed queue. If I want to feed data into that queue and then connect Elasticsearch into it, will it just slurp them in at real time, or?
Yeah. So the rivers in Elasticsearch are a singleton on the cluster, and if the river fails for some reason, the cluster will spin up a new copy of that, and I think essentially it's a pull operation. So a lot of these you know, other data storage mechanisms, RabbitMQ and stuff, have a way to query like the most recent data that's come out of it, and so it essentially takes advantage of that. I don't have it on here, but there's also basically an SQL river as well. So you can, because the interesting thing here, take a note. So a lot of times you have your data, but you want to do more things with it than your current storage structure will let you do, right? And so, but the challenge is now I have to start dividing up my data, and problems start multiplying, right? So, you know, if I've got my data in an SQL database, or I've got a bunch of stuff coming in RabbitMQ, RabbitMQ is awesome for what it does, but if you want to search it, you can't. And so, you know, things like Solar and Elasticsearch become very key in these kind of things if you want to be able to do more interesting things with your data. In certainly the NoSQL space, there is a trend that essentially is trying to combine the two things. It's not I don't know anybody who's trying to combine it, RabbitMQ, but in general, if you look at React, if you look at MongoDB, if you look at CouchDB, you look at Cassandra, they're going towards the direction of trying to have more features that we've seen Elasticsearch and Solar have, so that you can keep all your data in one place and do the things that you want to, instead of having a bunch of data over here, then I've got to shift it over to the search engine so I can do search engine work with it. And of course, Elasticsearch and Solar are going the other direction. They have all the search capabilities. They're trying to become more of a general purpose database or data storage engine to kind of help alleviate some of that.
Have you ever written you know how complicated it might be to write your own river? Have you ever tried that?
So the question's about writing your own river. I have not. I've looked at the code for the Twitter river, and I think it's a single class or with a couple of imports. It's actually really quite easy to do.
Have you heard of one for Kafka?
I haven't for Kafka. But
Dynamo?
Dynamo probably. I mean, this is the thing. The community's growing. It's getting bigger all the time, and so. You know, and there's a lot more people that are contributing rivers and all these other kind of things for it. Logstash is one that's really quite popular as well, pulling the logs into Elasticsearch and kind of, you know, doing that rolling structure that I was talking about. Solar Elasticsearch, normally, you know, those are the ones that get compared to the most similar. Solar now, up until the last year or two, Solar is now part of Lucene and part of the Lucene release structure, where it was sort of a separate project before. So Solar will always be more up to date on the latest Lucene releases than Elasticsearch will be, just sort of by nature. And that may or may not be important depending on how cutting edge that you guys are with things. It definitely has a larger community. It's been around a lot longer. It's been used a lot more. Has a larger tool set as well. Feature set, tends to be more in line, obviously, with Lucene. And if you like XML, that's a positive for you. If you don't like XML, then that's not a positive for you. But.
Is there so one of the things I found positive with Solar is that it's well documented how you can write plugins.
Right.
And a plugin is like for those. Sounds like you already know, but just, it allows you to do stuff with the results. That's one example.
Yeah.
So
you're right, and that's, there's some pros and cons both there. Solar has definitely some advantages in how certain plugins are written for Solar. Elasticsearch it's actually very pluggable as well, but not as many people have used it. It's not as well documented. You're right. That's probably something I should add to the slides. Documentation.
Well, I didn't know. I was actually asking.
No, I know
wasn't
you weren't
alluding to anything.
Yeah, I know you weren't trying to correct me. I'm
okay.
just self-correcting here and saying, yeah, actually, that's a good point. But yeah, you're right. I mean, Elasticsearch is more of a frontier.
Just for the record, I wasn't saying that. I'm really wanting to know. We're currently deciding between the two.
Oh, is it okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's fine. I wasn't taking it that way.
Okay.
It's like, come on, I thought you were hecking me. Come on, let's go. Let's get some stuff going here.
Yeah.
So Elasticsearch, it's natively distributed, which can be a real advantage. JSON based, which again, depending on where you live, it can be an advantage or a disadvantage. Certainly the way the queries can be documented in JSON makes it much more readable over doing query strings. It's very dynamic, the template-based schema or defined schema. As a matter of fact, you can partially define a schema and partially define a template. Elasticsearch will fill in the template part for you, which is really nice. Elasticsearch will actually also return the source document that you indexed by default, which is another, I believe in Solar you have to specify the fields that you want to get back. By default, Elasticsearch will give you the entire document back unless you tell it you don't want to, and you just want to get specific fields back. And also, by the way, I'm not trying to make this Elasticsearch versus Solar, Elasticsearch better kind of a deal either. It's just they're very similar technologies, and so the committing thing, there actually is a mock Solar interface. So if you're more familiar with that, then but it's just for the HTTP interface. It's not for the XML configuration. But if you've got an investment in the Solar interface, it eases the transition over to using Solar. Then of course the use of rivers as well.
Can you describe natively? Are you just saying like RPMs and stuff are available? You don't need like a Tomcat container to run it, or What do you mean natively